Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show. Today we discuss about thank you. So it's important to say these words because you can motivate and encourage others. I'm so excited to discuss this topic with Jim Edwards. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, for me it's a big pleasure. I want to learn more about that. I know that you wrote a book, so it's my passion to read books as maximum as possible. Of course, I consider my job, but I usually search for the best time. And before we start, I wanna tell about our sponsor, uh, Serenkin, a top-related all-in-one SEO platform. I like Serenkin for their very accurate rank tracker tool, which shows your daily rankings for your website in 5 search engines for any location, device, and language. You can monitor Google Maps results in 35 search features for every keyword and much more. Just Google Serenkin rank tracker and explore 40 days for free. Jim, before we start, just tell more about yourself, experience, background, and why you decided to write this awesome book.
Okay, so until earlier this year, I was the editor-in-chief for news at Insider, the digital news service that is perhaps still best known for Business Insider. And I left the company after 10 years. And when I joined the company, it was a small blog with a handful of staff. Very few people read the product. It was very much an underdog. And as the years went by, we built a huge audience. More than 200 million people read Insider every month now. It has 1,000 employees. It has offices in Singapore, London, New York, and Los Angeles. The newsroom alone is 600 people, and we sold the company for 442 million. And this year they won a Pulitzer. So we did something right. And my experience at Insider was completely different from working at any other company. And it's because the company has had a unique internal culture that they worked very hard on, and a different way of managing people, particularly journalists in the news business, than I experienced at any of the other companies I worked at. And the other companies I worked at are, I worked for CBS for a period. I was the managing editor at Adweek. I worked for a couple of daily newspapers. And I freelanced for a bunch of people: MTV, AOL, The Independent, so on and so forth.
Mhm,
So
nice.
I just thought, maybe I should write a book inspired by what I learned at Insider about management and how to lead people and make them more successful.
Nice, love it. Yeah, I know how it's important management because I often see when companies, they hire jack of all trades who can do anything, but it's hard to get results. But management can unite a team of experts who pay attention to one direction. Can you tell more about this experience with Insider? How you can grow such huge audience for 10 years? It looks like a long time, but it's not, 200
Yeah.
million people. I think, it's huge audience. Can you tell you pay more attention to satisfy user-centered customers, readers, and about the culture? Because the reason why I'm asking about the culture,
Sure.
a few years ago, let me share my story, short story. A few years ago, I had an issue in my company. A toxic environment appealed. I didn't know about that because I spent so much time with one big project, and I decided to do anything to provide this project according to deadline. But when toxic environment appealed, a few key players left my company, so I decided to research and got it. Something was wrong, so we fixed, of course, all this issue. But can you tell more about culture? How to build this culture, and about the center of approach? I mean, like, what Insider can do better than competitors to satisfy readers?
Okay, that is a long question.
Yeah.
I think that one of the main differences at Insider compared to certainly other media companies and companies generally, is that they were very careful to measure what everyone was doing. And Insider is a web-based business, so you can look at traffic, you can look at page views, you can look at uniques, you can look at visits, you can look at time spent on the site, you can look at, they have a paywall on their good articles, so you can see how many people have subscriptions and how many people don't. And there's an endless number of metrics you can look at. But Insider made an effort from the very beginning to measure a lot of that and to pay attention to what worked, and very importantly, to pay attention to what does not work. And one of the earliest decisions they made is a decision that they still make every day at the company. In the very early days, they said, we want to provide a business news service, but we're going to be very specific about what kind of business news we will provide. We're not going to provide boring business news. We don't do boring, right? That was a phrase we would repeat to each other inside the company all the time in 2011. We don't do boring. So there were just certain companies and entire industries that we would just never write about because they were boring and readers didn't seem to care about them. And we just asked the existential question, if we are bored of this business and readers are bored of this business, why would we write about it? And yet, if you look at traditional business news services, particularly newspapers, they will cover a large range of companies that you don't care about. And they cover them almost on a ritualistic basis, like a traditional basis. They have always covered them. And some of these companies are very old. Some companies are like hundreds of years old. And the news business continues to cover them simply because the news business has always covered them. And what we discovered at Insider is actually there's a small number of companies that people are really interested in and they're really excited about. Apple, Facebook, Google, Amazon. There's a number of others as well. I won't go through the entire list, but there are some companies that people like really care about and drive people insane, and they're just very enthusiastic about finding out more about them. And then there's a large number of companies that people just don't feel passionate about. And so we made this early decision. We're not going to be like the Wall Street Journal. We're not going to be like Bloomberg. We're not going to do everything. We're only going to cover the interesting stuff, the fun stuff, the entertaining stuff, the exciting stuff, the stuff that really gets your pulse racing. So the product from the beginning was different like that. And we measured the results of that, right? So it wasn't just, based on our feelings, I personally find Apple a very interesting company, but we didn't do coverage of Apple because I personally felt interested in how the iPhone was doing. We did it because, first of all, I was excited to find out what the new iPhone was going to be like in 2012. But also we looked at the results of what we did, and, readers poured in for news about Apple. But they didn't pour in for news about Compaq or I'm trying to think of other boring companies, 3M, stuff, but there are many boring companies. We tried covering mining at one point. No, it turns out that it's very difficult to get people interested in Rio Tinto zinc and stuff like that. So we made this decision and we measured it. We're not going to cover the boring stuff. We're only going to cover the exciting stuff. And we're going to measure the results. And if readers show us that they're excited about something, we will lean into that and do more of it. And if readers show us that they're bored of it and they're not interested, we will stop doing it. And we made that decision on a macro and a micro level every day at Insider for the entire 10 years I was there.
Nice, love it. You mentioned this word boring. I like this word because for example, I have a huge list of books that I want to read, and some of them are good for sleeping. When you have the problem with sleeping, you can read, and you can sleep well the whole night. You don't remember anything from this book, but it helps to sleep. Can you tell how to create content that people want to read? For example, I have some authors that I can't stop reading. For example, Jack London. If I read his books, I don't know, it doesn't matter what I need to do, I can't stop. I can read 4 hours, 8 hours, if I have time, of course. Can you tell about how to retain readers longer? Because if you have this issue with boring and you want to create excitement content, entertainment, can you tell how to unite business content with entertainment, because for me it's like
Yeah.
different directions, when you want to have fun or to get some educational stuff.
Okay. So the best example I can think of, and this is an author that I return to again and again, is Michael Lewis. And Michael Lewis wrote The Big Short, which was the book about the collapse of the mortgage and the real estate business and the credit crisis in 2008. And it was turned into a very funny movie. And he's written a number of other great books. And I'm blanking on all of the titles. His most recent book is The Premonition. And he also wrote Flash Boys, which was about a scandal on Wall Street in which some traders were found to be, they gained the ability to see other people's incoming trades and would trade in front of them. They would front run the trades, which is a type of fraud, I guess. And that is also being made into a movie. And Michael Lewis is possibly right now the most successful business news content writer on the planet. And the question is why? And it's because he's a good writer, but why is he a good writer? What makes his writing good? The answer is he does a couple of things. He really understands the difference between show and tell. And this is a very simple concept in writing that new writers and beginning writers and early writers, rookie people, they make this mistake all the time. Your instinct as a writer is to tell people what you think they need to know. This is wrong. People do not want to be told what to think. No one wants to be told, right? Actually, people want to be shown what is happening. People want to be shown what the argument is. They want to be shown the details. They want to be shown the facts. They want to be shown the specifics. They want to see these details for themselves. And after having seen all the details, then that will allow them to decide on their own how they feel about it. And obviously, if you, as the writer, present the facts and the details in a specific way, you can persuade them to agree with you, right? But you have shown them the details and the facts and the specifics. You have not told them what to think. And Michael Lewis is just a master at that. So for instance, in The Big Short, we all know what happened in the financial crisis of 2008, right? What happened was interest rates were very low. It became very cheap to borrow money. More and more people borrowed money to buy houses. The price of houses went up. The price of houses became so great, it exceeded people's ability to pay their mortgages. And it also became a bit like a Ponzi scheme. There were too many high-priced houses that could not possibly be sold for profits. So clearly this was a bubble waiting to burst. At the same time, a lot of the banks had generated leveraged credit instruments around these mortgages that would allow them to bet on moves up and down on the underlying asset value and also the interest rates. And leveraged bets are a magnification of risk. So if you've already got risk in the system, and if the system is already a bubble, and then on top of that you have leveraged risk, now your risk is magnified exponentially, and you've got a real problem, which is what happened in 2008. And this problem caused a large number of banks to collapse and a huge number of people lost money. Okay, so that's me telling you what happened in the financial crisis. Now, all of that is true and it's important, but that is not the most interesting story you ever heard, right? That is, it's a little dry, right?
Yeah.
In Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short, one of the characters, he follows, I think, 3 sets of characters who are investigating this mystery of why so much money is wrapped up in these mortgages when these mortgages cannot possibly be sold to anyone, right? Because the pricing is out of whack. So he follows these 3 people who are investigating this like Sherlock Holmes, really. They're investigating a mystery. One of them goes down to Florida and he goes to a strip club and he gets a lap dance from a stripper. And he asks the stripper, what's going on in the, does she own a house? And the stripper says, yeah, I own 3 houses. And he's like, with all due respect, how does the stripper own 3 houses? And she says, well, I buy them and flip them. And I make more money buying and flipping in houses than I do giving lap dances like this. And then he interviews the stripper, right, to get the details of what she's doing in the mortgage market. And from this, he concludes, okay, this is crazy. If strippers in Florida are buying and flipping houses, then clearly there is something wrong in the real estate market, and this whole market must be in trouble. I'm not disrespecting strippers, by the way. Sex workers are great. And if you're a sex worker, please continue to buy and sell real estate. But there's an old, this is the modern version of, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Carnegie. Carnegie was once the world's richest man. And right before the Great Depression in the 1920s, when the stock market crashed, the story is, and it's a legend, I'm not sure it's true, but the story is he got his shoes shined in the street, and the shoe shine boy gave him a stock tip. And that was the point where he realized, oh no, the idiots have arrived in the marketplace. I have to get out. Right? So the stories I've just told you about the shoe shine boy and the stripper, those stories were much more interesting than my explanation of how the credit market works in 2008, right? And you will remember the stripper, and you will remember the shoe shine boy far longer than you will remember my explanation of the crash of 2008. And it's because those stories show you what was happening at a human level with humans and drama and narrative. They don't tell you what happened.
Yeah, love it. I like how you can share all the stories, because for me, storytelling style is the best. People are not interested to read features, numerous features. They wanna get stories, and with these examples, you can get a lot more. And I remember 2008 because the world crisis destroyed my financial company in Ukraine. When it came, I lost all my revenue, all my resources, investment, anything. Even more. I had debts like 3,000 average salaries in Ukraine. So I worked 5 years hard, to get them back. I remember this time that was hard because I was not good with finance, like strippers. I didn't understand that if everything is fine today, doesn't mean it will be all the time. So I felt like this, but it's life. What we can do is just got experience to go ahead, overcome it. Can you tell more about storytelling style? You shared about these examples. For example, if my audience wanna learn to write interesting, excitement stuff, can you tell how to share the stories? Do you have some template or format how to provide these stories? Because, for example, if we have this example like stripper and the whole market, it's far away, but it's a real story, and you can unite with the whole market crash. Can you tell more about template or methods to share stories?
When you say share stories, do you mean how to share them on social media, or do you mean how to structure the story when you're writing
structure
it?
It's more about structure.
Oh, okay. This is a good question, because I used to teach a class in this at NYU.
Nice.
So if you're telling a long story, I'll just talk about long stories, because short stories are different, and they have a different structure. But long stories are more interesting because it's more difficult to tell a long story and to hold the reader's interest for a long period of time. But basically, there's a type of structure that is used a lot by the New Yorker, which is the magazine that typically has the best writing of all magazine journalism. And one of these stories will start off with an anecdote that is bizarre or unusual or very detailed or dramatic or curious or sexy or just exciting in some way. And the story will be about an individual who has some kind of struggle or problem to overcome. A bit like the anecdote I just told you about the guy researching the mortgage market who ends up in Florida talking to strippers to find out why they're flipping houses, right? So that would be a really great opening anecdote. That's a great opening scene to lead off with, okay? And you describe it in detail with just the details and just the specifics. Don't tell readers what to think. Just show them that strippers in suburban nightclubs in Florida are investing and selling houses when they didn't used to. And then at the end of that anecdote, set up the question, why? Why are they doing this? How has this happened? You know, why is it that sex workers are suddenly interested in property? It doesn't make sense. And after setting up that unanswered question, crucially, do not answer the question. After setting that up, then you need a section of the story, which I call the nut graph, where basically, as the writer, you take a step back and you say, okay, why is this happening? What's the big picture? What is the history here? What are the consequences? What is the potential damage that could happen if this situation continues, right? And that's the place where you actually describe that this stripper is not just a random woman in a random nightclub, that in fact, there are millions of people all across America and all across the United Kingdom and Europe who are doing the same thing, who are suddenly buying houses and then flipping them for profits, and no one is living in the houses, and no one is ever expecting to pay off the mortgage. So you describe the scale of the problem. Ideally, you would like a killer statistic. Perhaps you could say, you know, that this year there were 10 times as many houses that were flipped as compared to 5 years ago. Or you could say that this year banks have, I don't know, banks have like 10 times as much money invested in the mortgage market than they did 5 years ago. You just want a killer statistic to show readers that this is a much bigger deal than it used to be, and but still don't explain to them why, right? You just want to give them the full scope of the problem or the crisis. And after you've done that, so now you've done two things. You've got a really interesting opening with lots of details and an unanswered question, a mystery. And then you've given the readers the scope, the size of the problem. After that, you can actually wind the clock back and you say, okay, let's go back to the beginning. How did this start? What is the origin of this? And if you can find a person, preferably, who in some way represents the origin of the story, tell their story, follow them. You can tell their story chronologically. That's one way to do it. But you have to be able to tell the entire scope of the issue through this one person. This one person's life story has to, in some way, represent or be symbolic of the entire problem. And then at the end of the story, what you want to do to really make the story effective is you want the very final anecdote in the story to return to the stripper in the nightclub who is flipping houses and to resolve that problem or to resolve the mystery or to finish the unanswered question, right? What happens to her? Did she succeed or did she fail? Did she get her money out just in time, or was she bankrupted? You know, was she rendered homeless? And so if you can start the story and end the story in the same place and close that circle, that is a very satisfying way to tell a story. And this is a technique that is used in the movies a lot. Like, movies follow this format. So one of my favorite movies is Heat by Michael Mann, which is a bank robbery movie. Do you know Heat by Michael Mann?
No.
All right. So it stars Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. One of them is a cop and one of them is a bank robber, and they chase each other through.
Yeah. I watched this movie. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a very long movie, right? But the beginning of the movie involves this one bank robbery in which Robert De Niro's one of the criminals he's working with betrays him, right? And De Niro decides to execute this guy, right? Because he's betrayed him. But something goes wrong and the guy escapes. And the entire rest of the movie has this question hanging in the background. What happened to the guy who escaped? And will De Niro find him first? Or will the guy get De Niro and kill him before De Niro realizes? And then this is only wrapped up at the very end where the escaped guy comes back and there's a confrontation. And I won't spoil it for you, but this movie is 3 hours long, right? So it's a 3-hour movie waiting to find out what happens to the guy in the beginning.
Nice. Love it. Let's talk about being yourself or standing out from the rest. I see a big issue when content creators usually copy successful other competitors, check out their content, rewrite, create the same content. and nobody cares about this content. And you mentioned that Insider has own approach, to satisfy intent, not to be boring, to find their way. Can you tell how to find your style? It's a big issue because many people don't know how to be yourself. They just copy. They don't know how to test different formats. From your experience, for example, if I want to be myself, I don't copy others, but it's hard if I start from scratch. From your experience, how to do it?
This is a good question, and I will disappoint you by saying that actually copying other people's style is actually quite a good way to learn how to write. So sometimes if I'm reading something and it's really well written, if I really like it, if I find it really exciting, and the test for good writing is this: when you read it, do you feel like you are reading it, or does it feel like a movie is playing in your head and you have forgotten the fact that you are actually reading it? And when you read a good book, you will know it's more like watching a movie because you can see the book inside your head, right? If you read a bad book, it feels like reading. It feels like work. You've got to go from word to word, forcing yourself along. Okay, so whenever I encounter some reading where I forget that I'm reading it, I'm just watching the movie inside my head based on the words, that's when I stop and think, okay, what is this person doing that has really got me here? Why is that? How did they do this? And then I will go back and look at what they did. And you can see techniques that they've used. Very often a good technique is to use a lot of dialogue. Tell your story with dialogue. Tell your story. Don't tell your story. Have the characters in your story have a conversation, and the story is the conversation, right? So that's a very simple and easy technique. Lots of very well observed details. Again, show people what's happening. Don't tell them what's happening. But on many occasions in my life, I've read really fantastic, particularly magazine and news articles, because that's my business. But whenever I read a really, really good one, I go back and say, okay, how is this structured? Why was this good? I look at my favorite bits. What was good about the good bits? Why was it good? And often the answer is they're showing me what's going on with tiny, beautiful details, and there's lots of dialogue, and the characters are great, and I can feel like I can see the characters because there's good descriptions of them, and the descriptions don't tell me what they're like. The descriptions show me what they're like, right? So the description won't say he was a bad man. The description will say, there was a scar on his face. He had lost one eye from being in a bar fight, and he had spent more than 10 years in prison. Okay. Now I told you, I showed you that he was a bad man. I didn't tell you he was bad, but I showed you he was bad by describing a scar, that he was in a fight, and he had spent a long time in prison. This is not a good person, right? But I don't need to tell you he's not good. I can show you he's not good by giving you the details of his life.
Yeah, love it. Okay, let's talk about your book. Can you tell why you call this book Say Thank You to Everything? For example, you can share the link to Amazon, so I can share with my audience. Okay, I'm interested about this book so much. Let me tell you why. For example, many people think that I'm SEO expert. I'm not. I'm so bad with many directions. I'm not good with link building. I'm not good with content creation. I'm not good with many other things. But I can manage good experts, specialists. I cooperate with many well-known experts, to create cohesive stuff. So I love management more than learning about one specific direction. So we can unite all jobs and to get the final product. Can you tell how to unite thank you and management? For me, it's like two different directions. Of course, I'm grateful that I can cooperate with many experts. I can tell them whatever happens. I even say thank you when people hate me. They tell me, "Oh, you suck. Your
No one
pronunciation is
hates
suck."
you, Anatoly. No one hates you.
Yeah, but I love them. For me, I don't pay a lot of attention to them. I remember when Seth Godin, Gary Vee, many other guys proclaimed that hating, just ignore it, go ahead. For me, it doesn't matter. But I respect that when people share their opinions, that's okay. Possible they are not my audience, but I'm interested about uniting thank you and management. Can you tell how do you unite these two words?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very simple, but so I learned this lesson one time in the office at Insider. I was supervising one of my colleagues. We had worked on a long project, and it was late on a Friday night, and we had to stay late on Friday to finish the project, and everyone else had gone home. And at about 7 or 8 o'clock, finally, this woman had finished. She gets up from her desk, goes to leave the office, and just as she was about to leave, I said, "Oh, hey, Laura, one more thing." And she turned around to look at me and was like sort of looking daggers, right? Because she thought she'd gotten out and I was going to pull her back in. And so I said, thank you for all the work you did this week. It was really noticeable. And I know we had to work long extra hours, but, I really appreciate that you did it. And it was effective. And I'm glad we did it because, it's this project is important. It's going to be really noticeable. And her face just changed. Like she was like, "Oh, that's great. You're welcome." And she left on feeling good about the project. And then after she had left, there was this guy sitting across from me. His name was Ellis, and he was staring at me. And so I said to Ellis, "Ellis, what is your problem?" And he said, "I've never heard anyone here say thank you before for the work we've been doing." And I thought to myself, really, no one has ever said thank you? And as I was writing the book, I thought back at all the other jobs I had done and realized that very often bosses do not say thank you to their staff just for doing the work. And in my experience as a boss and as a manager, if you say thank you to people, and if you make it very clear to your team and your employees, you make it very clear that you notice the work that they have done, that you really appreciate it, that it was noticeable and it was good, and you praise the good stuff they have done, even though it's their job and even though you are paying them. Just show your appreciation and say thank you. That is what people want to hear. People feel validated by that. It goes a long way, and it is the single most effective and easiest trick as a manager you can do. And it's not a trick, by the way. It should be real. I want to make that clear. Not a trick. But the easiest thing you can do to make yourself better than the majority of managers is to just remember to express gratitude to people when they do work for you. Because in a large number of jobs and a large number of companies, no one ever hears the word thank you.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's check out another side. For example, if the job is not good, and in my company, I tell everyone, we can test. That's okay if we fail, but we know that it doesn't work, so we can change something to search for other directions. And for example, if you are not satisfied with the job 100%, if you feel that this job it's possible to do much better, do we need to say thank you at that point or not?
That's a good question. So there's two pieces of advice I would give you. The first is, if you're dealing with an individual or even a team that has failed at a project, it just, whatever they were working on, it just didn't work. It was crap. My advice would be to give them that feedback in private. Do not stand up in front of the whole office or in a big public meeting or do not send an office-wide email, right? Take them in private. Go into the conference room or go to a private video chat like this one and say, okay, I know you worked really hard on this, but look at the results. The results are not good. So let's walk away from this. Let's stop it and do something else. Okay. So first of all, deliver criticism in private. Praise in public, criticism in private. That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is if anyone or any team in your company works on something and it fails, you need to stop quickly, figure out why, and if you cannot make it work, walk away. And inside a lot of companies, no one does this. In many companies, no one has the job of consciously looking for things that are failing and then saying, hey, this doesn't work, let's stop doing it, right? And a really good example of this actually is Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. I don't know if you watch Gordon Ramsay's. Have you ever seen Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a famous reality TV show in which a Michelin-starred chef who has a very short temper goes into a restaurant. The restaurant is always failing. It's always a terrible, horrible restaurant. And basically, for most of the show, he yells at these idiots until they change everything they're doing, and then the restaurant becomes successful, right? But one thing that Gordon Ramsay almost always does, and in almost every show this happens, he looks at the menu, and the menu that they're offering is like 15 pages long, right? They're offering 200 dishes, and all of them are shit. Okay, so Gordon Ramsay's first piece of advice is to throw the menu away and offer a single page menu with maybe 12 dishes on it. So that the kitchen knows exactly what it will have to cook, and it will cook the same thing over and over again, and they will become good at it, and it will become better, right? And this is one of the easiest ways to improve a restaurant. Reduce the size of the menu and become good at the few things that you do.
Nice. It's common issue, by the way. I often see in restaurants, when I have just one piece of paper, but very good, or when you can take like book and you can't find anything from that.
So the reason I like Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares is it's a very good example of saying you've got to walk away from everything that you are doing that is failing. Just stop, and just focus on the small number of things that you're doing very, very well. And that is the way to win. Focus.
Focus. I love it. I see that, for example, I have 100 things to do every single day, but I usually prioritize, find that it's very important, necessary stuff, and just or delegate or forget about something that less necessary. I agree.
You're absolutely right. Forgetting about the trivial things, that is important. And a mistake people make is a lot of people think to be successful, you have to do all of the things and to be excellent at all of the things. And this is why people work really long hours. And this is why they work all through the night and on the weekends. This is wrong. Actually, it is far better and more efficient to forget the trivial things and just do the top things.
I agree with that. Jim, I have the question about, for example, let's imagine you started from scratch without any experience, knowledge, skills, anything. What will you do to learn more today about management?
I would buy this book.
Nice.
Oh gosh, I don't know. What would I do if I had to start from scratch? I would look around my company and I would ask my colleagues, I would say, who here is actually a good boss? And by good, I mean, not just do you enjoy working for them, because a lot of people like their bosses, sometimes because they're not very good bosses. They're a bit too relaxed. They don't care if you show up late, that kind of thing. So you want to identify who are the bosses who are good. People enjoy working for them. They're not stressed, but they're very productive. They're successful at what they do. Figure out who that boss is, and then go to lunch with that boss and say, I have never managed a team before. I would like to. Please tell me how tell me your secrets. Tell me your tricks. How do you do it? What's the what's the good advice and what's the bad advice? What mistakes should I avoid?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I am a big fan of copying people who are already successful, I have to say. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really an underrated piece of advice. It is difficult to be, it is difficult to be Leonardo da Vinci, where you are just like completely original, and you're just a sort of sui generis genius.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's a lot easier, and it's a lot more effective, and it's a lot more efficient to identify someone who's already successful, and then to just go ask them how they did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Okay, I have the final question about the future or AI. Let's talk more about AI.
Okay.
I check out one study online that employers choose AI boss than a human being. Uh, and I don't know why, but I think in most cases because many bosses are not good. They can't encourage. They are so stressed. Many other stuff. Can you tell why we have this issue today? Because 70% of people hate their jobs. It's a real fact.
Okay.
And can you tell how to be much better boss? And because machine can beat us today, people wanna have AI who can control them, who can manage them, because of these bad bosses. Can you provide your insights about that?
I am not sure I've met anyone who would prefer an AI boss to a real boss.
Yeah, I need to find the study. I will share with you.
I would be, yeah, I want to see this study. That's it.
Yeah.
That seems really interesting. I'm trying to think, what would the advantage of having an AI boss? The problem with
It's like
AI is that if
Mhm,
it makes a mistake, it's very difficult to convince AI that it is
mhm,
wrong, because
mhm.
the AI just simply checks its data set and says, well, I have rechecked my data and I reach the same conclusion, because unless you can enter new data into the data set, I can't learn anything new. And some bosses, of course, do behave like that.
You mentioned this word stressed. Some bosses can provide stress. You need to
Yeah.
do it's your job. For
So
example, on
maybe
Friday, yeah,
maybe the workers choose the AI because they know the AI isn't human and has no feelings and it doesn't
yeah,
care.
have no
So
emotions.
if you disappoint the AI, no one cares, right? So you have a very stress-free work life if your boss is AI, because you're just like, well, it's Friday, I'm not coming in. You don't like it, I'll just switch you off and see you on Monday.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if yeah, this study sounds interesting. I'd like to see it. The
Yeah, I need to find it
and
because
Well, okay,
I
let me just
yeah.
riff on this. It might be the case, maybe it's the case, and I have no idea. But so this is speculation. But one of the problems with having a human boss is humans do love stories and anecdotes, right? And it is very easy for a human manager to see one thing, to see one success story, or to see one failure about you, and then to judge you in your entirety based on that one failure or that one success story. And all of the rest of the work that you've done for the entire year goes out the window, because you were associated with this one mistake or this one success, and then your manager will either promote you or not promote you based on this anecdote. And I call this management by anecdote, right? And in the old days, almost all management was management by anecdote, because there was very little data, and so managers just rewarded people and reviewed people and judged their performance based on their feelings or their instincts or their personal interactions with their workers. Nowadays, you can generate data about almost any employee or any worker to see what they're actually doing, to see what their real success is. Are they really, how productive are they really? You can track how many sales do they make, how many customers do they talk to, how many phone calls do they answer, how many stories do they write, whatever the metric is. You can track their metrics, and the metrics are objective, right? They're not based on your personality or your feelings or your relationship with them or whether they played golf with you or went for drinks with you. It's not based on any of the anecdotal stuff. It's just based on what they actually did. And this is especially powerful for workers who are quieter, than the average worker, workers who sit further away from their bosses than people who are in the center of the room. It's particularly good if you are a worker who is woman or a person of color, or you have a disability. So and if your boss is maybe a guy and maybe white and et cetera, and you're not in the same sort of like social demographic as your boss, being judged solely on the numbers where everyone is equal because everyone is judged on the same numbers, that can be very powerful in demonstrating to your boss that actually, hey, I sit far away, I'm very quiet at work, I don't talk a good game, we don't play golf together, we live in completely different neighborhoods and we come from different social backgrounds, but you know what? Here's my sales record for this month, and I'm the best in the office regardless of your feelings. That is a very powerful piece of information to give your boss.
Yeah.
So maybe they and AI would get that, and humans sometimes don't get that.
Yeah, so valuable. Yeah, I remember the study from Gary V Audio Experience podcast, and he shared that we have a lot of bad bosses, and he told that bosses need to serve their employees, not vice versa. Bosses need to serve all people who can work with them, and he mentioned about himself that he works a lot harder and more than any employees on his company. He got only a few vacations for 20 years because he wanna serve his team. So yeah, it's something like this. Yeah, Jim, it's a big pleasure to get on my show, to learn from you, to get a lot of valuable insights. Tell our audience how they can reach out to you, learn more about you, follow you.
Okay, well, you can, the book is called Say Thank You for Everything. You can find it easily on Amazon or just Google Say Thank You for Everything book. I'm on Twitter at Jim_Edwards. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. On Instagram, I'm at Jim Edwards 123. But if you Google Jim Edwards, Say Thank You for Everything, I'm easy to find, frankly. And,
Okay.
my email address is out there, and I'm happy to answer DMs and all the rest of it. So.
Nice.
I'm happy to hear from people.
Okay, guys, you can find all these links in the description below. Listen us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Thanks again for your time. A big pleasure. Welcome back anytime back, to share more value. People, you need to follow Jim. You need to read this book. I'm going to do it because I love management. I want to improve my skills in management. And I know if I read this book, I can get a lot more by reading this book. Okay, guys, love you. See you.